I pulled out a weight vest. I went in my office. I didn't want anyone to see, and I started cutting it up. I took, back in the day when all offices used to have that big paper cutter with the long blade hand. Yeah, I don't know if we still have those, but that was the only thing strong enough to slice the lead. So I was slicing the lead weights. I was breaking them into quarters, about 100 grams, a couple ounces each. Then I was trying to figure out how do I glue that on, and I started buying like wetsuit material, and I started gluing it. Yeah, it was just that Nick Winkleman said it. Nick from Exos, and a great guy, and somebody we've had a lot of strong connection with, and he really resonates with what we're doing with the product. But he said to me, Joe, every strength coach or trainer in the world has tried to glue weight on the body. Now you've done it. Now it's going to take us 20 years to figure out how to use it. And I still love that story, and I always tell it because my story is no different than yours or anybody else's. Anybody listening who's been in the field a while has tried to make some way to add weight, a sandbag, a tape, rope, whatever it is. We've all been trying to strap load on the body because it's not that it replaces things like traditional resistance. It doesn't. But when we get movement specific, traditional resistance falls apart for two reasons. It's too heavy, the increments are too large, and most important, it's an external load rather than what we call an internal load. And this is a really important point. If we're going to fill out the force velocity curve, and this is a good place to start, because again, strength coaches are well versed in things like the force velocity curve. If we look at that and we look at high force, low speed, that's your big bulk of traditional resistance, right? That's your heavy weights, dumbbells, kettlebells, whatever it might be. And as you move down that, we've moved into things like cables and tubings and weighted vests and ankle weights, stuff that sort of fills out the middle range. But that far right range where almost all sport occurs, there's almost no tools out there. A 1080 is a good tool, but then it's very limited in its use for movement, right? It's a great linear tool. But how do you train at speed? How do you train movement? And so ultimately, what I feel is we've created the best movement tool for high-speed training or sport-specific movement. And essentially what we have now is, I think for the first time in our 30, 40-year history of a strength coach, is we have a complete toolbox in the full realm, from strength to speed. And so that's kind of the first thing I think I'd like people to understand is, because I know when new tools come out, a lot of people just, they become proponents of their own tool. This is the new thing. This is what you use. Like you've seen kettlebells come up, and now everything is a kettlebell exercise. And I'm like, well, it's just another resistance that you have to teach how to use. And the key difference is this: with traditional resistance, it's equipment defined training. So our first platform as strength coaches was to learn how to do strength training exercises. Then we learned that technique. Then we had to teach that to an athlete. And then the athlete can only get benefit from it once they've learned how to train with it. Whereas wearable resistance or internal exercise, you don't have to teach the movement. You put it on them to accentuate the movement they already know. And that's the key thing. So you're working your skill of a start, your mechanics in a baseball throw, a quarterback in a throw, a defensive lineman on a roll, whatever it is, you already know the movement. So up here, you have equipment-defined movement. Down here on the far right of the curve, you've got user-defined movement. And it's a really critical sort of gap that defines the difference between those tools. And all we did was make a version that you can put on the body. And for those, I don't know if this is a visual podcast or if there's an audio, that's a load. That's a new load. That's 200 grams, that's 8 ounces. And like Jeff and the guys know, when you put that on a moving body at high speed, it's doing a lot. And, and there's specifics on why that's shaped like that. That's actually related to muscle architecture. And the increments are also small. We've got a 50 gram, 100 gram, a 200 and 300 gram, which is 2, 4, 8, 12 ounces. And one thing we found when I was actually creating the kit, I actually thought this is going to be too light, because what is a weight vest weigh?
Hell yeah. I mean, even anywhere between, you could usually, the lightest is 8 or 10, and then it probably goes all the way up to 40 or whatever they want.
Yeah. So I started creating this kit, and I remember movement had to be at the core of it, not loading. And so I looked at it from the other end, where we're always looking at how do we load more? I was thinking, no, how do we keep movement the core value that we're trying to put in this equipment? And as I went through, I just realized, man, the weight can't be heavy or else everything's going to fall apart. Like a weight vest, it's going to be bouncing, it's going to hit you in the head. Like an ankle weight or a wrist weight, that with a distal loading, the first thing you're going to be wired for is, I don't want to throw my shoulder out. Your brain's doing that before you're even conscious of the movement.
Yeah.
And so, because the body wires itself for safety first, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what you do. If you ever look at somebody like a special forces training, boxing or combat training, the first thing you're teaching a person is how not to essentially flinch, because the body's first response is safety. Whereas in combat and a lot of those other activities, you have to think about going forward when your body's saying don't. And so if you put a heavy load on the body, no matter what you want to do, if you're a baseball player and you put a 500-gram ball in your hand, and we know this debate is huge in the world of baseball, right? And you go to throw that, the moment you pick that up, the brain registers, what are you trying to do here? I'm not going to let you throw this fast. And so you try to, but your wiring pattern has changed for protection. And then you spend, half your career trying to get past that and maybe end up with that injury. And so one of the things I found out was I just can't get a lot of weight on the body. So I thought actually in the early prototype stages, it wasn't going to work until I started putting on high performance people. And I was having athletes saying, Joe, I don't want heavy weight. This is the right amount for me to sprint with. This is the right amount for me to jump over a high jump bar. This is the right amount for me to pole vault with. This is the right amount for me to swim with, or for throwing or tennis or golf. This was the right amount for me to get what I need done at high speed and to accentuate those last percents of movement that they were really working on. And again, from a high performance perspective, you're working on 1%ers. You're working on all those little details that change you and an opponent on game day. And so those were kind of the really early findings and wonderings. But at the end of the day, for anyone listening, remember, it's still just weight training, but it's very lightweight training. And we're using it to accentuate movement. And I wrote down here before we started, our whole job, what's the job done of a strength coach? We should be focused on one conversation. How do we make better movers? How do we make better movers over time? So they move as well at the beginning of a competition as well as they do at the end of that competition. And that's what the debate has to be about. That's what the conversation has to be about. That's what moves the field forward. And I think Exogen provides a tool to help that. And again, it doesn't replace things that provide high levels of muscle mass development, maximal and optimal strength. You're not going to get max strength with a 4-ounce weight. If you're a football lineman and you have to add weight in the off season, well, that's not going to do it for you. But if you're slow and you need to move and you're technically not hitting the patterns you do and your timing's off and everything related to the game needs work, then you're going to be using tools that you're in control of.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.